upfront presentation content. So feel free to just start adding those in via the chat function. And then obviously when we do get to the Q&A session, if you would like to ask your question verbally, then you can request to do so and we'll unmute you accordingly. The webinar is being recorded and we'll share this recording after the webinar has been completed. And we'll also share the slides and supporting resources accordingly. If you are speaking during the Q&A session, after you finish, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and just to make sure that everyone can hear, we don't have any background noise and kind of distortion on the line. So welcome again. My name is Janet Southern-McCormick. I'm a Senior Programme Manager with ChallengeWorks, which is one of the delivery partners for the Sustainable Cities Challenge, working very closely with the funder and lead partner, the Toyota Mobility Foundation, together with World Resources Institute. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dina, who is a Programme Coordinator also with ChallengeWorks. And so we'll take you through today's content, but I'm also happy to say I've got Vince Keenan from the City of Detroit on the line. So welcome, Vince. And then we've also got Trey Ingram, who is our key point of contact and key lead at the Toyota Mobility Foundation. So you've got some really strong people in the virtual room today, and so you can ask your questions to them and they'll be able to respond accordingly. So for today's session, we'll be covering 3 buckets. The first is the overview of what the Sustainable Cities Challenge Detroit is about. We'll then talk a bit about the process of entering the challenge, the nitty-gritty of that and things you might want to be aware of. And then we'll segue into the question and answer portion of today's webinar. So let's get started. First section up, what is the Sustainable Cities Challenge Detroit? Well, first of all, let's talk a bit about the Sustainable Cities Challenge as a whole. So this challenge aims to really take advantage and harness the power, the creativity and the energy of innovation to look at improving the access of safe, equitable and sustainable mobility solutions for all. We've got 3 city challenges that are being run. They're all open for entries at the moment and closing in September of this year. So obviously we've got Detroit, we're talking about transforming freight, looking for solutions that will reduce fossil fuel use and also cut costs of freight operations within Eastern markets specifically. And for those who are interested, we've also got 2 other challenges. We've got Venice, which is about embracing sustainable mobility. This is around behavior change, including the increased use and adoption of low and zero carbon transport modes in the city of Venice. And then in Varanasi, we're looking to innovate crowd flow. So how to make crowded areas of the old city of Kashi within Varanasi safer and more accessible for tourists, residents, and vulnerable populations. So let's zoom in on why Detroit and why Eastern market. So obviously known worldwide, Detroit is the motor city. It's not new to the world of mobility innovation. And there are a few things to bear in mind here. It really plays a central role in the food industry within the US. It has the largest historical public market district within the United States. And it's a really key hub for food production, but also processing, packaging, and distribution. We have over $360 million of whole food sales, and it exports double that to international markets. So it's really, really important within the food industry, domestically, but also internationally. It's also a significant economic and logistical hub with millions of visitors annually. It's got really close proximity to Canada with 3 border crossings, and it really is an organizational point between farmers, wholesalers, logistics, operators, and also distributors. So it's really bringing together lots of different stakeholders within the economic landscape. And finally, in terms of the opportunities for innovation, there's a lot going on in Detroit and specifically within the Eastern market area. There's a neighborhood framework plan that sets out a lot of information around residential housing expansion, food manufacturing. Definitely worth taking a look at that and familiarizing yourself with it. There are plans to create green buffer improvements and optimize trucking routes. and really a huge ambition to double the market footprint and increase traffic in terms of freight over the next 20 to 30 years. So there's a lot of opportunity within Eastern Market and a lot of opportunity for innovation within that space. So what's the problem? So we've got a few things to talk about here. One is kind of current challenges. And here we've got sort of the Eastern Market as continuing to expand, both as a market, but also as a mixed use neighborhood. It's not just a commercial area. There's a huge community element here. And so really there are some opportunities to harmonize food production and distribution with clean freight, but also look about doing it with maximizing and taking into account environmental pressures that can impact business operations. So really it's around trying to increase opportunities to maximize those operations whilst reducing emissions and making it continually competitive for stakeholders within that space. So solutions that you are all coming to the table with really need to be adding value to the wider freight ecosystem. And it's about integrating potential solutions without creating additional significant costs. That's really, really key. And the final piece is around them being easily adopted and used by operators within the landscape and specifically Eastern Market stakeholders. So that's something to bear in mind. And Vince can also, provide further detail on that if there are specific questions that arise around it. So what's the challenge statement? Now, the challenge statement itself is a call to action to you, innovators. And what it does is it really breaks down what the specific aims are without prescribing what the kind of solutions specifically need to be. So it's telling us what the desired outcomes are without saying the solution has to look like X, Y, or Z. So in the case of this challenge, the challenge statement is around demonstrating solutions that reduce fossil fuel use and cut costs of freight operations in Eastern Market. And I'm reading this off the slide because the wording is really important here. Solutions should address one or more of the following. They should reduce idling time and or reduce partial loads and empty miles and or reduce reliance on fossil fuel for cold chain logistics and freight management. And finally, and or reduce implementation costs and barriers to adopting clean freight technologies. So this is really your North Star. And so when you're preparing your entry, really you should be keeping this top of mind in terms of aligning your solution to this goal. So let's talk a bit about structure and timeline. We've got the timeline mapped out here. I should say that we've got 3 stages. So the first is the semi-finalist stage, where we'll have up to 10 teams participate in this stage between November of this year and March of next year. Those teams who are selected will need to sign the agreement within 1 week of receiving it. It's really critical. We want to be able to make the most of this time period. And so, signing that contract with the Toyota Mobility Foundation and jumping straight into the work is critical. During this period, these teams will each receive a grant of up to $50,000, and they'll focus on developing their solution and building relationships within the Eastern Market landscape. The second stage is this finalist stage, of which we'll have up to 5 teams, and this will run between June and December of next year. Within this phase, each of the teams will get a grant of up to $130,000 each, and this is all focused on demonstrating and refining solutions. And then finally, the last stage is this winners stage, where up to 3 winners will be selected, and they will be implementing their solutions from March 2026 onwards. And in this stage, those winners will share a pot of up to $1.5 million, which is focused on the implementation of their solution within Eastern Market in Detroit. And that's really, really important, right? The funding must be used to develop, test, demonstrate and implement the solution within the Eastern Market. That is the purpose of the funding and the solutions being created. Another key thing to bear in mind is that if you are selected, if your team is selected to be a semi-finalist, you will need to attend an in-person Innovator Academy that will take place in Detroit between the 9th and the 12th of December this year. It's critical that participation in that is required. So let's move on to criteria. The first set of criteria I want to just quickly talk through is the eligibility criteria. And this criteria is talking about who can enter the challenge. If you don't meet the criteria here, your challenge will not be accepted, it will not be reviewed. So it's very important that you take a look at these in detail and ensure that you do meet those criteria in order for your solution, your entry to be reviewed and considered. I won't go through every single criteria here that's listed up on the screen, but I do recommend that you thoroughly interrogate this and make sure that you are comfortable that you meet all of those criteria before spending the time to submit your entry, prepare and submit it. The second set of criteria which are important to talk about are the judging criteria. And these are the criteria that entries will be assessed against, and against which we will use them to select the semi-finalists, the finalists, and eventually the winners. And so you can see here in the case of the Detroit Challenge, we have 6 key judging criteria. And I'm going to go through this at a high level. So reduction of fossil fuel use, innovation in Eastern market, the adoption potential by businesses, tech maturity, potential to scale, and capability to deliver. So in the case of the first one, reduction of fossil fuel use, this is about the potential impact of your solution on decreasing fossil fuel use. That's really, really important. In terms of innovation in Eastern market, how does your solution, what's the degree to which your solution improves and offers novelty in relation to current practices within Eastern market? How does it stand? How do they stand out in terms of the broader landscape of emerging and sustainable freight solutions? In regards to adoption potential by business, so we want to understand your solution and your team's understanding of the user circumstances, the needs and expectations of how these will be addressed via your solution. Tech maturity. So this is around the state of planning, development, and testing at each stage of your tech roadmap. And this really needs to include co-design with users, off-site testing, and on-site demonstration, again, within Eastern market. Looking at potential to scale, here we're talking about how the solution has the potential for achieving long-term market viability after the challenge has been completed. And so this may include expanding to new customers or use cases within Eastern market, but also beyond. And finally, in terms of capability to deliver, this is around understanding the team and their understanding of the skills and partnerships that will be necessary to deliver their solution effectively, and how they're able to fulfill those requirements as a team or their plan to do so. So these are really, really critical. And again, these are the criteria that entries will be assessed against. So at this point, I think I'm going to pass over to Dina, who's going to take us through entering the Detroit Challenge and what that process entails.
So Janet just gave you guys the challenge statement, the judging criteria, the eligibility criteria, and now we get to the most important question: how can you be part of the Detroit Challenge, or how can you enter? So important information that you need to fill out an online form before the entry deadline. The entry deadline is the 12th of September. So you guys have around 3 weeks to finish your entries, and we highly encourage that you, before you submit your entry, read and understand the following things: is the challenge terms and conditions, our privacy policy, eligibility criteria, challenge statement, and the judging criteria, because these will help you refine and understand the challenge statement better and make your entry tailored to this challenge. So when you go into the Sustainable Cities Challenge website, when you click on the Detroit City Challenge, you will have an Enter Now button that will lead you to Submittable, which is an online platform where you will be submitting your entry. The eligibility form is this is the first form you will have to fill, which is a simple multiple choice form that you have to fill, and then it will just confirm your eligibility. And Janet just went through the eligibility criteria, and it's straightforward. So you just have to click on the right choices. That's it. And then you will be moved to the interview form. The interview form is confirmed of 4 parts, and you will only be assessed against one part, which I will lead you through it now. The first part is your details. You just have to give the name of the organization, the type of organization, and confirm that you have read and submitted the eligibility form. The second part is the most important part. This is the part that you will be assessed and scored against, which is your solution. You have to give us your solution title, describe it in 1 sentence, and then the last part is in 200 words, explain your solution to us. There is also an optional part that you can upload a video, a 3-minute video, talking about your solution. It doesn't have to be a highly edited video that you have to like recruit an agency for or nothing. It could just be like a slide deck or graphs or you speaking about your solution. But just keep in mind that the solution is not a substitute for the other parts. You have to give us the description. The third part is additional information. Just this part will help us in our impact and due diligence checks. You will not be assessed against this part. So just focus on the second one. And it's, as you see, it's a multiple choice part. You have to check the one that you think your solution is best suited for. And it's a straightforward form. Declaration that you have to confirm that all the information you have just entered are true and correct to the best of your knowledge. So I'm just gonna say one of the most frequent questions we're getting is, can I upload any other documents to the form? No, you can't. Unfortunately, you cannot upload like any graphs or PDFs or anything. We will just be assessing what you write or what you enter in the form. And as we go along in the challenge, you will be able to produce us with more documents to highlight your solution. Oops. So we will go into our Q&A session. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can answer questions. So yeah, so we're waiting for your questions.
And just while we are waiting for the questions, I just want to underscore, you may have seen on an earlier slide here that Dina talked through, that when you go to our website, you'll see that there are a few different links up there before you press enter now. There's the entrant handbook, the terms and conditions, and the FAQs. All of those are important, but we strongly, strongly encourage you to review the entrant handbook. The entrant handbook really has all the information that you will need, and then some, in terms of preparing your entry and being able to feel confident around what you're putting in your entry ahead of that deadline. So really do take the time to look at that handbook. It will be the first port of call for you in terms of gathering information. Just switch back to our Q&A session. And let me just check if we've got any questions. None have come through at the moment. So whilst we're waiting for those, I just want to check in with Vince and Trey on the line. If there's anything that you may want to add. Vince, I was thinking particularly in terms of the Detroit context, if there's anything you wanted to throw into the mix from your perspective.
Well, I think I'd like to say to anybody that is interested in applying that we're eager to hear some great ideas. We've been doing these webinars and interviews with folks for some time now, and I haven't heard any idea at this point that seemed like it wouldn't be interesting to go through and possibly even implement. So I think there's a lot of potential. And if you do have any questions in particular, scheduling a time, a one-on-one session is also very helpful. But we're really looking forward to seeing everybody in Detroit.
And thanks for that, Vince. And I think we have a hand raised from Patrick. So Patrick, please go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to talk about this. Vince, how you doing? It's Patrick from Guest. Wanted to see, so during the implementation period and the startup, are there any limitations on making revenue for the entity, for the company during this time period? So I know it's a startup, but can we at least start making revenue during this process, working with companies in the Eastern market, or are we limited to not making any revenue off of it?
So that is a great question. I know that I've got colleagues, Trey in particular, on the line. I think my point of view, and Trey, I'm keen to get your thoughts, but my point of view is if your model is allowing you to create income and revenue at that point, I don't see there being a concern around that. I suppose the question is whether that will be possible within the construct and the confines of the landscape of Eastern market and your ability to create partnerships with those relevant stakeholders on the ground before you can actually deploy your solution. But Trey, I don't know if you wanted to come in on this.
That's essentially correct, as long as you're achieving the contractual obligations for the Sustainable Cities Challenge, and if you happen to be generating revenue at the same time, that's just kind of icing on the cake for you guys. But as long as you're meeting the contractual obligations of Sustainable Cities Challenge, that's what we're concerned with.
Patrick, hopefully that answers your question. Go ahead.
Do you have like the contractual obligations listed somewhere? Because I've got everything printed out. I just don't see that on what, what if there's any current listed contractual obligations of what, from hours of operation to et cetera, et cetera. I just can't find that in the forms that I have printed out.
Yep, great question. I knew that was going to be the follow-up question. We do have the template innovator agreement finalized, and when you submit your entry, Submittable will email you a copy of that innovator agreement. There's nothing as specific in the agreement as like operating hours or things like that. Like, it's not getting that nitty-gritty into those details. It's more about meeting deliverables and meeting the thematic goals of the Sustainable Cities Challenge and things like that. But once you submit your entry, you'll get a copy of that sent to you via email. Our legal team wasn't comfortable just having the agreement kind of out for everybody to download, just quite frankly. So the compromise was that for any innovator that completes their entry, they are then sent a copy of the template agreement.
Patrick, hopefully that answers your question. But if not, then please feel free to either add a follow-up in the chat or raise your hand again. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through via the chat, a couple from Debraj. So the first one, and I think the first two actually will probably go towards Vince, if I can. The first is, how does the truck system work? Are they owned and operated by the vendor companies themselves, or is there a separate agency operating the trucks?
So that's a great question. They are owned and operated by the vendors or contracted leasing through a couple of larger leasing organizations. There is no central management or ground traffic control. There is a loose organization and agreement to route information through the Eastern Market Partnership. But one of the reasons that we have over the course of these webinars in this particular challenge talked about the matchmaking that we'll do at a later date, rather than to say go out and find a partner that you think you can work with, is because the individual operators in the market right now are aware of the challenge, but they're not particularly seeking out innovation. And so we want to make sure that we find the right partnerships. The bigger picture advantages of, say, logistical, operational control that can be done top down probably won't apply here. There is no top to push down from. However, what we hope to be able to do is see different concepts and ideas that can demonstrate the value of central coordination and build that over time. So we're hopefully positioning this more as it's an opportunity. It's a blank slate. We are unburdened by legacy operational technologies, but I'll also say when you get into a larger provider, like say, for example, Penske that does provide leased vehicles for certain operators, they'll have their own management systems. Some of the larger providers in the market have their own management systems, but it is all at this point not centrally coordinated. And I may have been trying to answer the first and second questions there at the same time. And if I failed, please ask for clarification.
Thank you, Vince.
Great. So Debraj, hopefully that answers your question. We have added like a response to that, and I'm going to add the same response to your second question. But if you do, as Vince say, have a follow-up, then please just type it in or raise your hand, and we can address that. And we've got a couple of extra questions that have come in from Anna. Thanks, Anna. And the first is, we offer a solution tailored for the construction industry that optimizes delivery logistics, reduces traffic, and cuts down CO2 emissions. Could you let me know if Detroit is currently seeing a high level of construction activity? So again, this is one for Vince. I know we spoke a lot about, there's a lot of activity happening actually over the immediate period, isn't there? But I'll hand over to you to pick this one up.
Yeah, no, we are for the city of Detroit having a relatively high period of construction activity. That being said, the Eastern market is bordered on the south by a major offshoot of an interstate. I-375 is an offshoot of Interstate 75, and that is slated to go under construction in 2027. It's causing a great deal of concern for the freight operators in the area because it is a route that they're used to having access to, and the construction to bring that section of roadway to grade is going to be an inconvenience for them. So there will be a lot of construction traffic. I would also put a caveat on that to say the bulk of the traffic within the market is not construction traffic. So the bulk of the traffic that we're targeting with the Sustainable Cities Challenge Clean Freight Initiative is food and cold chain logistics traffic. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Great, thank you so much for that, Vince. Anna's next question is, clarification is, I'm asking because we can really make a difference if the traffic caused by vehicles delivering construction materials is a significant issue in certain neighborhoods. So hopefully again, that response that Vince just shared makes sense. So again, please feel free to add a follow-up, Anna, if you need to. So David asks, are smaller local farms that produce smaller quantities included in Eastern Market's operations? And if so, is it up to the farmer to drop off the goods, or are there pickup routes that Eastern Market run, RUS run? I'm guessing that's run.
So I think the answer to that question, and again, this gets a little more into the logistics of how the market operates, but in general, there is not the kind of central operational command and control insight that would allow for sort of suggestions of economy on route pickups. The delivery shed or the total shed of deliveries to the market is anywhere from 300 miles to, and I apologize if someone can convert that to kilometers for folks. It's 300 miles at the farthest, but that's an extreme circumstance. Most of it is coming in between 100 miles and 50 miles. Again, they're coming in directly from the farms. A lot of the growers and operators own their own vehicles. And so they bring their stuff in, and the market accommodates what comes in, but predominantly is focusing on measuring throughput when it gets to the market, not how it gets to the market. And that's really part of the insight that we hope to be able to achieve through the Sustainable Cities Challenge. So you're right on point. But the challenge part there is, how do we figure out how to get that information without disrupting operation, and without necessarily it being an initiative of the provider themselves saying, we want to contribute our operational data here to try and see if we can make this a more efficient process. We have to convince them through the course of these kind of initiatives that that's the way to go.
Great, thanks. And I'll just finish typing up those points, David, and send those via the chat. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. What are the main pain points that brought this challenge into existence? So Vince, I think this kind of leans back into the kind of context of Detroit and kind of the opportunities that exist around the kind of freight system within that particular landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of characterize it this way. We have a growth potential in this area. There's a small industry opportunities for new businesses to develop. There's also mid-sized industry in food production, and even larger scale food production. And so we are building out this neighborhood. So one of the challenges is more people in more trucks in the same space. Another challenge is this upcoming major construction happening, disrupting routes, and there is no sort of central coordination happening right now. So anything we can do over the course of time to help, build out that the understanding of how this works. And then I would also add to that, what I was just talking about is in the previous question, in the margins on food delivery and what is happening at the market are razor thin. And so the food gets to where it needs to get to today. And the general sense that like we are not in a position where we can go in and say, okay, everybody, let's get together and we're going to make this work better. Because essentially this is the beginning of a conversation about attempting to look at particulate emissions and carbon and duplicate routes and empty miles and idle time, and all the things that come with it are right now considered, that's just the cost of doing business, and we need to keep people fed. And so you got to eat. And that's the reason that the freight operation as it exists today is allowed to exist the way it is. So we are looking at trying to work with the growers and providers at a period of growth to try and figure out how to do it better during a time that they may be growing as well, and the city is growing as well. So as far as the pain points go, I might be able to distill that to say, this isn't a pain point being felt by the providers that operate freight that are producing the emissions. No one's going to be opposed to a better or cheaper operation. But what we found is that there's very likely a conversation about reducing diesel runtime is a conversation about saving money on the cost of diesel fuel than it is a conversation about saving the planet. And so, or reducing pollution. So we've got a number of those dynamics involved, and that's I would say the real challenge or pain points that we're dealing with.
Thanks so much, Vince. Try to capture that in the notes, but as with all of these, Vince, please feel free to add anything if the typed version of your responses doesn't quite capture your intentions. A few more questions coming through. So another anonymous attendee, the second phase entails solution demonstration. Can you talk more about the demonstration side? Can it be in a representative environment like a simulator, or does the demo have to be on the ground? This is a really interesting one. And if I can maybe start off, and then I think Vince, Trey, probably all of us will pile in on this. I think the key thing here, as we've said, and apologies if we sound like broken records, but the Eastern market is a really critical landscape, but also set of stakeholders within this whole challenge, and not just as a sort of context setter, but throughout this whole piece. So as Vince was talking about in one of the earlier questions, you know, being able to look at the various different needs of Eastern market, and the kind of the needs that they have, the different stakeholders, how it's all coming together, how it's operating as a system, in order to be able to, you know, really demonstrate solutions that would work there. You know, you really want to be demonstrating them on site, on the ground, with providers in real time. And part of that is the partnership piece, being able to build and grow and maintain those partnerships in real time. And I think a key element of this is trust, right? This is about trust, and it's about being able to work with them collaboratively with a long-term perspective in mind. So I would say probably the simulator side of things may not be as appropriate or as needed. It's more around working on the ground in real time with stakeholders from Eastern market. Vince, did you want to maybe come in and add more, and also Trey too?
I would just, Jan, I think you handled that. I agree. I think I would double down on this point. Not that the simulator isn't important, and that there aren't people that would be able to look at a virtual simulator, but ultimately the partnerships that we need in order to implement on the ground are with they're with farmers. They're incredibly practical, and so you know, if you're trying to show somebody something and you ask them to come and do something and you show it to them on a computer, you're probably not going to have the same impact as if you could show it to them in operation in the real world. That being said, you know, I know there are some things that aren't demonstrable easily in the real world. So I'm just sort of putting that caveat out there to say your audience is skeptical. Your audience isn't using necessarily computers and logistics for logistics operations already. In some cases they are. So you're going to have to be very deliberate about the communication when we do those partnerships, when it comes to that phase of the challenge.
The only other thing that I'll add to what Janet and Vince have already said is that for whoever submitted that question, if you wanted to book a one-on-one with us, and we can talk like very concretely in a confidential environment, if you don't want to kind of say the exact scenario that you're thinking about in your head on this webinar, that's totally fine. You can book a one-on-one with us, and we can kind of talk through your kind of exactly what you're thinking, and we can maybe provide more direct feedback.
Thanks so much, Trey and Vince. We've got 3 more questions here, and we're actually already close to time. So we've got about 3 minutes left. So we'll try and power through these 3 questions, and then we'll look to wrap up. But of course, if there are more questions that spring to mind, you can always email us or book a one-to-one, as Trey has mentioned, and we'll share that information in terms of who you email and how you book after we've answered these last questions. So the first one here is from Debraj again. In terms of partners we will engage with or be partnered up with, would they be willing to collect data for a second phase? And presumably you're referencing the data for the second phase being the finalist phase. I'm making an assumption there. In terms of the partners, so we wouldn't necessarily be helping you to broker and create those partnerships. Like, we're making the connections through Vince and his team to the various different stakeholders on the ground. But part of this challenge is for the solution teams to be creating those partnerships themselves, right? And really building that, because that's where the sustainability, it kind of links to this previous conversation that we've been sharing around, you know, the kind of long-term viability and sustainability of these solutions is rooted in the partnership of these various stakeholders. In terms of whether they'd be willing to collect data for a second phase, that really depends on the partnership that you end up building with them. And hopefully a successful partnership would result in that. However, in terms of data, there are some things that we are doing on our side to be able to provide successful semi-finalists with. And Trey, and I think I see John on the line too. Apologies, John, I didn't see you originally. But Trey, John, did you want to come in and kind of make a comment in terms of the data side of things that we can provide?
John, I'll let you tackle that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're in the process now of collecting publicly available information, as well as through some vendors, data specific to what we anticipate as being needed, data points from the innovator side. In terms of collecting data at a later point, that will all obviously depend upon the relationships that are established and the data needs between partners. But at least upfront, what we can say is, while there's been somewhat of a sort of grassroots approach for Eastern Market, therefore there's no consolidated sort of location for data related to you know, freight movement. We're looking to establish that, as well as provide additional information about other metrics that would be impact factors upon solutions like air quality readings and whatnot. So it's a work in progress, but we're looking to aggregate data and make that available to innovators as soon as possible. And as we move forward, we'll understand more granular needs between partners, and we can take an approach beyond that once we get there.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate your input on that. And Deborah, hopefully that addressed your question, but again, feel free to clarify if not. The next question is from Nana. Nana asks, is the grant cash or in kind? So the grant that will be provided is all cash. So that will be provided to you and you can use that, but again, all within the context of developing and refining your solution within the context of Eastern Market. So if you do have a further clarification, let us know. And then our final question is from David. So he asks, what about outbound logistics? Does Eastern Market offer distribution services to smaller local grocery stores? I guess this is again one for Vince to lob it over the fence.
I would say as a matter of practice, they don't. We're getting into Eastern Market operations area where it's possible that they do something that I'm not aware of. But I think while Eastern Market does have some fleet operations, very small, most of that is targeted at moving things around inter-market or intra-market activity. When you look at, say, for example, the produce market that runs every day, the smaller scale deliveries are being done by the purchasers that are coming into the sheds, looking at their bulk purchases and then moving it into medium duty and smaller trucks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vince. And thanks everyone for those questions. I think we had some really strong questions. Again, we're getting some really great questions across all of the webinars we've been running.
Yeah.
So thank you hugely for your engagement and your presence, virtual presence here. Just to kind of close us up then for today, we do have a lot of opportunity to kind of connect with you outside of the webinars. So if you do need further support preparing your entry, we have a lot of information again on our website. So we definitely encourage you to go back there. And that's where you can book your one-to-one sessions with our team. So you can go on there, you can book through that system, and you'll get a 15-minute slot through which you'll be able to ask your questions and kind of get clarification that you might need. And then, of course, if you have other questions that you just want to send to us, but don't necessarily want to have a chat, if you're sick of hearing our voices, you can always email us at info@sustainablecitieschallenge.org. But please do send your questions by the 4th of September. After this date, we might not be able to respond to you in time ahead of the deadline of the 12th of September. So please be aware of that. And a final point is, please do not reach out to the City of Detroit or the Eastern Market Corporation itself directly at this stage. They won't be able to respond to you. So any questions or concerns should be sent to us via that email I just shared that's up there on the screen, or by booking a one-to-one session via our website. So I think that's all from us today.
Yeah.
We're just a couple of minutes over. Thank you for bearing with us as we share this final bit of information. A big thank you to Vince, John, and Trey for joining us today, and thank you to all of you for attending and sharing your really strong questions. Look forward to hearing more from all of you, and hopefully receiving and reading your entries. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll follow up with the recordings and follow up for this webinar. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.